guys, we're going to continue reading Book of 3. We're on to chapter 14, The Black Lake. That night Medwin prepared a feast for the travelers. The disorder left by the breakfasting bears had cleared away. The cottage was snug and neat, though even smaller than Caer Dallben. Taran could see that Medwin was indeed unused to entertaining human visitors, for his table was barely long enough to seat them all, and for chairs he had been obliged to make do with benches and milking stools. Medwin sat at the head of the table, and the fawn had gone to sleep, but the wolves crouched at his feet and grinned happily. On the back of his chair perched a gigantic gold-plumed eagle, watching every movement with sharp, unblinking eyes. Fluter, though still apprehensive, did not allow his fear to affect his appetite. He ate enough for 3 without showing the least signs of becoming full. When he asked for another portion of venison, Medwin gave him a long chuckle and explained to the amazed Fluter that it was not meat at all, but vegetables, prepared according to his own recipe. Of course it is, Elenway told the bard. You wouldn't expect him to cook his guests, would you? That would be like asking someone to dinner and then roasting him. Really, I think bards are as muddle-headed as assistant pig keepers. Neither one of you seems to think very clearly. As much as he welcomed the food and the chance to rest, Taran was still silent throughout the meal, and he continued so as he retired to his nest of straw. Until now he had never imagined Henwin might not be alive. He had spoken again with Medwin, but the old man could give him no assurance. Wakeful, Taran left the briar and stood outside, looking at the sky. In the clear air the stars were blue-white, closer than he had ever seen them. He tried to return his thoughts from Henwin. Reaching Caer Dallben was a task that he had undertaken, and that in itself would be difficult enough. An owl passed overhead, silent as ashes. The shadow appearing noiselessly beside him was Medwin. Not asleep? Medwin asked. A restless night is no way to begin a journey. It is a journey I am eager to end, said Taran. There are times I fear I shall not see Caer Dallben again. It is not given to men to know the ends of their journey, Medwin answered. It may be that you will never return to the places dearest to you. But how can that matter if what you must do is here and now? I think, Taran said longingly, that if I knew I were not to see my home again, I would be happy to stay in this valley. Your heart is young and unformed, Medwin said. Yet, if I read it well, you are one of the few who I would welcome here. Indeed, you may stay if you choose. Surely you can entrust your task to your friends. No, Taran said after a long pause. I've taken it on myself, and it is my choice. If that is so, answered Medwin, then you can give it up through your own choice as well. From all over the valley it seemed to Taran that voices came urging him to remain. The hemlocks whispered of rest and peace. The lake spoke of sunlight in its lingering depths, the joy of the otters at their games. He turned away. No, he said quickly, my decision has been made long before this. Then, Medwin answered gently, so be it. He put a hand on Taran's brow. I will grant all that you will allow me to grant, a night's rest. Sleep well. Taran remembered nothing of returning to the briar or falling asleep, but he rose in the morning sunlight, refreshed and strengthened. Elenway and the bard had already finished their breakfast, and Taran was delighted to see that Gurgi had joined them. As he approached, Gurgi gave a yelp of joy and then turned to gleeful somersaults. Oh, joy, he cried. Gurgi is ready for new walkings and stalkings. Oh, yes, new seekings and peekings. Great lords have been kind to happy, jolly Gurgi. Taran noticed Medwin had not only healed the creature's leg, but had also given him a bath and a good combing. Gurgi looked only half as twiggy and leafy as usual. In addition, he saddled Mellingar. Taran had found that Medwin had already packed the saddlebags with food and included warm cloaks for all of them. The old man called the travelers around him and seated himself on the ground. The armies of the Horned King are now a day away, a day's march ahead of you, he said. But if you follow the paths I shall reveal and move quickly, you may regain the time that you have lost. It is even possible for you to reach Caer Dallben a day, perhaps 2, before them. However, I warn you, the mountain ways are not easy. If you prefer, I shall set you on a path toward the valley of your Strahd once again. Then we would be following the Horned King, Terran said, and there would be much less chance of overtaking him, and much danger there too. Do not think that the mountains are not dangerous, Medwin said, though it is a danger of a different sort. A flam thrives on danger, cried the bard. Let it be mountains or the Horned Kings, I fear neither, not to any great extent, he added quickly before his harp began twinging. We shall risk the mountains, Terran said. Once again, Ellenway interrupted, you've decided the right thing. The mountains certainly aren't going to throw any spears at us, no matter how dangerous they are. I really think you're improving. Listen carefully, then, Medwin ordered. As he spoke, his hands moved deftly in the soft earth before them. He molded a tiny model of hills, which Terran found easier to follow than Fluter's map scratchings. When he finished, and the travelers' gear and weapons were secured on Melangar's back, Medwin led the group from the valley. As closely as Terran observed each step of the way, he knew the path to Medwin's valley would be lost to him as soon as the ancient man left. In a little while Medwin stopped. Your path now lies to the north, and here we shall part. And you, Terran of Caer Dallben, whether you have chosen wisely, you will learn from your own heart. Perhaps we shall meet again, and you will tell me. Until then, farewell. Before Terran could turn and thank Medwin, the white-bearded man disappeared, as if the hills had swallowed him up, and the travelers stood by themselves on the rocky, wind-swept plateau. Well, Fluter said, hitching up the harp behind him, I somehow feel as if we meet any more wolves, we'll know they're friends of Medwin's. The first day's march was less difficult than Terran had feared. This time he led the way, for the bard admitted, after a number of harp strings had snapped, that he had not been able to keep all of Medwin's directions in his head. They climbed steadily along until the sun had turned westward, and though the ground was rough and broken, the path Medwin had indicated lay clearly before them. Mountain streams, whose water ran cold and clear, made the winding lines of sparkling silver as they danced down the slopes into the distant valley lands. The air was bracing, yet with a cold edge, which made the travelers grateful for their cloaks that Medwin had given them. At a long cleft protected from the wind, Terran signaled a halt. They had made excellent progress during the first day, far more than he had expected, and he saw no reason to exhaust themselves by forcing them to march through the night. Tethering Melangar to one of the stunted trees that grew in the heights, the travelers made camp. Since there was no further danger from the Cauldron-born, and the hosts of the Horned King moved far below and to the west of them, Terran deemed it safe to build a fire. Medwin's provisions needed no cooking, but the blaze warmed and cheered them. As the night shadows drifted from the peaks, Ellenway lit her golden spear and set it in the crevice of a faulted rock. Gurgi, who had not uttered a single moan or groan during this part of the journey, perched on a boulder and began scratching himself luxuriously, although, after Medwin's washing and combing, it was more through habit than anything else. The bard, as lean as ever, despite the huge amount he had eaten, prepared his harp strings. You've been carrying that harp ever since I met you, Ellenway said, and you've never played it once. That's like telling somebody you want to talk to them, and when they get ready to listen, you don't say anything. You'd hardly expect me to go strumming out airs while those cauldron warriors were following us, Hooter said. Somehow I don't think it would be appropriate. But a flam is always obliging, so if you really care to hear me play, he added, looking both delighted and embarrassed. He cradled the instrument in one arm. Almost before his fingers touched the string, a gentle melody began, as beautiful as the curve of the harp itself, lifted like a voice, singing without words. To Terran's ear, the melody had its own words, weaving a supple thread among each rising note. Home, home, they sang, and beyond the words themselves, so fleeting that he was not quite sure of them, were the fields and the orchards of Caer Dallben, and the gold afternoons of autumn, and the crisp winter mornings with pink sunlight on the snow. Then the harp fell silent. Fluter sat with his head bent close to the strings, a curious expression on his long face. Well, that was a surprise, said the bard at last. I'd planned something a little more lively. the sort of thing my war leader always enjoyed, but to put us in a bold frame of mind, you understand. The truth of the matter is, he admitted with a slight tone of discouragement, I don't really know what's going to come out of it next. My fingers go along, but sometimes I think that the harp plays itself. Perhaps, Fluter continued, that is why Taliesin thought he was doing me a favor when he gave it to me. Because when I went to the Council of Bards for my examination, I had an old pot that one of the minstrels had left behind, and I could do no more than pluck out a few chants. However, a flam never looks a gift horse in the mouth, or in this case I should say harp. It was a sad tune, Ellenway said, but the odd thing about it is, you don't mind the sadness. It's like feeling better after you've had a good cry. It made me think of the sea again, though I haven't been there since I was a little girl. At this, Terence snorted, but Ellenway paid no attention to him. The waves break against the cliffs and churn into foam, and farther out, as far as you can see, there are white crests, and the white horses of Lur, they call them. But they're really only waves waiting their turn to roll in. Strange, said the bard. Personally, I was thinking of my own castle. It's small and draughty, but I would like to see it again. A person can only have so much wandering, you know. It made me think I might even settle down and try to be a respectable sort of king. Caer Dallben is closer to my heart, Terence said. When I left, I never gave it too much thought. Now I think of it a great deal. Gurgi, who had been listening silently, sat up on a long howl. Yes, yes, soon great warriors will all be back in their halls, telling their tales with laughings and chaffings, and then it will be the most fearful forest again for poor Gurgi, put down to his tender head in snoozings and snorings. Gurgi, Terence said, I promise to bring you to Caer Dallben if I can ever get there myself. And if you would like it, and Dallben agrees, you can stay there as long as you'd like. What joy! Gurgi cried. Honest, toiling Gurgi extends thanks and best wishes. Oh yes, fond, obedient Gurgi will work hard. For now, fond, obedient Gurgi had better sleep, Terence advised. And so should we all. Medwyn has put us well on our way. It can't take much longer. We'll start at daybreak. During the night, however, a gale rose, and by morning the drenching rain beat into the cliff. Instead of slackening, the wind had gained force and screamed over the rocks. It beat like a fist against the travelers' shelter, and then pried with searching fingers as if trying to seize and dash them into the valley. They set out nevertheless, holding their cloaks before their faces. To make matters worse, the path broke off entirely, and a sheer cliff loomed ahead of them. The rain stopped after the travelers had all been soaked to their skin, but now the rocks were slippery and treacherous. Even sure-footed Mellingar stumbled once, and for a breathless moment Terence feared that she would be lost. The mountains swung a half-circle around a lake black and sullen below the threatening clouds. Terence halted on an outcropping of stone and pointed towards the hills on the far side of the lake. According to what Medwyn told us, he said to the bard, we should make it to that notch and all the way over there, but I see no purpose in following the mountains when we can cut it almost straight across. The lake shore is flat, at least, while here it's getting practical. Let's try that again. But I see no purpose in following the mountains when we can cut almost straight across. The lake shore is flat, at least, while here it's getting practically impossible to climb. Fluter rubbed his nose. Even counting the time it would take us to go down and come up again, I think it shall take several hours. I think we should save several hours. Yes, I definitely think it's worth trying. Medwyn didn't say a word about crossing valleys, Ellenway put in. He didn't say anything about cliffs like these, answered Terence. They seem like nothing to him. He's lived here a long time. But for us, it's something else. If you don't listen to what somebody tells you, Ellenway remarked, it's like putting your fingers in your ears and jumping down a well. For an assistant pig keeper who's done very little traveling, you suddenly seem to know all about it. Who found the way out of the barrow? Terence retorted. It's decided. We cross the valley. The descent was laborious, but once again they had reached ground level. Terence felt all the more convinced this would save time. Holding Mellingar's bridle, he led the group across the narrow shore, and the lake reached closely to the base of the hills, obliging Terran to splash through the shallows. The lake, he realized, was not black in reflection of the sky. The water itself was dark and flat, like the grim and heavy, like like the grim and heavy bottom of an iron. The bottom, too, was as treacherous as the rocks above. Despite his care, Terran lurched and nearly got a ducking. When he turned to warn the others, to his surprise, he saw Gurgi in the water up to his waist, heading towards the center of the lake. Fluter and Elenwy were also splashing further and further from the land. "Don't go through the water!" Terran cried. "Keep to the shore!" "Wish we could," the barge shouted back. But we're stuck somehow. There's a terribly strong pull." A moment later, Terran understood what the barge meant. An unexpected swell knocked him off his feet. Even as he put a hand out to break his fall, the black lake sucked him down. Beside him, Mellingar thrashed her legs and whinnied. The sky spun overhead, and he was pulled along like a twig in a torrent. Elenwy shot past him. He tried to regain his footing and catch her, but it was too late. He skimmed and bobbed over the surface. The far shore would stop them, Terran thought, struggling to keep his head above the waves, and a roar filled his ears. The middle of the lake was a whirlpool, clutching and flinging him to its depths. Black water closed over him, and he knew that he would be drowning. That is the end of chapter 14. Next we'll read chapter 15, King Edelig. Man, I do love these books. It's so crazy to me because I've read all 5 of them, and I think I remember everything about them. And I go, oh yeah, and they do this, and they do this, and they do this. And then I read it, and I'm like, oh man, I forgot about that. That was such a cool part. I'm like, wow. When I was a kid, this didn't strike me as like interesting as it does now. And it's like there's so much in this one book that it makes me think if I went back and reread all the others, that I would find more and more things that I had forgotten about. Anyways, I'm happy that I get to share this with you, and I hope you're enjoying it. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay happy and stay safe. Goodbye.